So welcome everyone. Welcome to this session on operational readiness, reacting to plant emergencies. So we are expecting quite a few people to join, mainly from operations at plants across North America. So we're not going to tell you how important it is to prepare for an emergency, because you already know that. But we're going to discuss how it can be done proactively. We've got two experts, both with a strong operations background, and they will look at how we can prepare people, to bring down plants more effectively and faster and start them back up sooner to reduce that downtime. So a big part of this proactive approach is to provide clarity. And when we say clarity, it's not only clarity in the emergency procedures themselves, but it's also clarity in the minds of the operators on what needs to be done. So joining us, we have Clint Jeffers. He is one of our directors of operations. He joined us from BASF fairly recently, and he has 19 years or more experience in manufacturing, so including 9 years at BASF in both operations management and asset management, and he also had 6 years with Total in both operations and corporate strategy. Joining Clint, we've got Fran Montemuro. He's also one of our director of operations with over 30 years of experience in manufacturing. Fran was plant manager at multiple DuPont sites and also the recipient of various excellence awards. So very, very happy to have you both here. Both Clint and Fran are going to provide, personal examples from their careers and operations background, as well as examples from our customers. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Clint, who's going to begin the session.
Thanks. Thanks, Christian. Hey, everyone. Thanks for taking the time out of your day. I know it's a busy time of year trying to get everything closed out, but we appreciate you guys joining us for the discussion around operational readiness and plant emergencies. I'm Clint Jeffers, as Christian said. Jumping right in, unexpected and unplannable events at manufacturing sites are going to happen. No matter the plant I worked in, it seemed like we were always surprised with some type of power failure from time to time. If it wasn't a thunder or lightning storm, it'd be a bird flying into a transformer, cold raccoon or possum finding its way into a warm, cozy MCC room and, just wreaking havoc on the rest of the site, causing some type of trip, be it partial or complete, of the whole unit. I'm almost not surprised anymore at some of the things I hear, the different ways that we can get our power taken out. So that'll be one of the items and key areas, that type of things that plants experience that we would prepare for. Another key area is catastrophic failure of key equipment. Those can require rapid shutdown of part or the complete operation. It could be a compressor, a non-redundant pump, maybe an instrument that started suddenly giving a faulty reading that's interlocked with some other part of the operation, causing the unit or maybe the whole site to trip in some way. Leaks, releases, other unexpected losses of containment are things that can require, short-term or long-term idling, stopping, and create long-term repair to the process, and can really shut us down, and we have to react immediately to limit the amount of damage that can be done to the environment or to remaining equipment. So our focus today is going to be around being prepared for those type of events, those type of scenarios, the ones that are high impact and that we just can't plan for or schedule ahead of time. It's during these types of scenarios, along with startup and shutdown operations, where we know we have significantly higher risk of incidents. CCPS says that half of process safety events occur during these infrequent events or types of operations. That ends up, because of the short duration, at being about a 500% likelihood that an accident or incident is going to happen, and that's tough to ignore. The reason for this is that the infrequency of these situations are experienced and learned. They have been, or at least used to be, nearly impossible to adequately prepare for. The CSP does give guidance. The Chemical Safety Board recommends that to prevent these types of incidents from occurring, facilities should employ effective communication, provide workers with appropriate training, and have in place strong and up-to-date policies and procedures for hazardous operations such as startups and shutdowns. Today, what we're going to focus on is the effective communication and training aspect, specifically the keyword effective. So obviously, we know that the consequences of these type of events extend further than just risk to EH&S. Financial impacts can be significant as well. The most obvious and immediate are the out-of-pocket cash costs that we pay to repair whatever acute damage was done. But many, if not most of the time, the larger costs come from the areas that we don't necessarily write out checks. Lost production and whatever margin or profits associated with that is quite often more costly than repairs. And I'd say most production facilities and companies understand and get that. But then what about the costs that are difficult to quantify? Like resources required to respond to the incident, perform root cause analysis, determine corrective actions, implement the corrective actions, come back later to verify the effectiveness of those corrective actions, and so on and on. Anybody at the manufacturing site knows that once something happens, that's just the beginning. And once we get back up and running, it doesn't just go away. So there's significant amount of work that goes into an event occurring, and then the follow-up to make sure that that never happens again. Budgets and key resources required for these efforts are then pulled away from other planned activities. One particular initiative I know now that many large companies have is focusing on net zero. Most that I'm aware of are putting those targets, the true net zero target, out at 2050. But many, if not most, also have major milestones set to be achieved by 2030. That's much more sooner than it may seem. No matter the path or past your company may be working toward, those solutions are going to take money, as well as resources that remain focused on implementing projects or other plant changes to achieve the goal. So, maximizing profitability by minimizing downtime, unnecessary equipment repairs, limiting those key distractions of those resources and key staff. Those things are going to be required to reach such an ambitious goal. So the things I've talked about so far are issues that have gone on and are going to continue to go on, these surprise events, right? They're not new. Well, maybe the specific net zero target, but not the surprise events themselves, or that those events distract us from other areas we prefer to direct our focus. There are a few factors currently in play that make solving those issues more difficult than they have been in the past. One thing people are talking about a lot, you hear, is the great crew change. And what that is the retirement of those manufacturing employees with 25, 30, even 40 years of in-plant, hands-on experience. This either has, is, or will impact most of the industry soon. Employees coming in, or even many of those in their roles today, simply hadn't had to respond to the emergency situations we're talking about today. So reasonably, we should expect that when those events happen, for them to have a more challenging time working through them than we have in the recent past. That is, unless we do something. Another area is voluntary turnover. We have kind of an acute issue with this great resignation that people are talking about post-COVID. But even before that, right, we were seeing much more willingness to change roles or even careers than we did 25 or 30 years ago. Could it be the prevalence of the internet, knowing more what's out there and available in the job market? Is it the skills gap that exists, requiring companies to change their recruiting strategies and go after and target employees that have some experience? The employees may be demanding more meaning from their jobs or more money. The change from pensions of days past, and that those no longer exist, and those may reduce employee loyalty. Who knows? It could be something else. I'm sure there's dozens and dozens of things that will affect it. Whether or not and to what extent each of those may or may not impact, I don't know. But what we do know is that more people are voluntarily choosing to leave their companies at precisely one of the toughest times to deal with that loss. So going forward, again, this problem is simply not going to, this problem is going to be more difficult to solve than it has been in the past. Again, that is unless we do something. A 2019 a survey from 2019 showed that 57% of baby boomers that were evaluating retirement had shared less than half the knowledge required to perform their jobs. 21% of those reported sharing absolutely nothing. That's nearly 80% of the exiting workforce that does not or will not have replacements prepared to step in. Again, unless we do something. So as we get ready to move into the demo of the simulator for the audience, please, I'd like you guys to keep in mind for those that are at the plants or have been at plants, maybe a time you were called about a particular event and you were concerned because the particular shift working had maybe never gone through that before, or simply were mostly new to their roles. If you ever had it cross your mind or actually done it in practice, thought about delaying particular critical or complex work just so you could have a certain individual or a certain shift on to do those activities. If you've ever been in a situation where you wanted or needed to hire more people than you could bring in, but you couldn't, not because of lack of approval or the need, but rather you didn't have the capacity to train them due to the lack of experienced people able to provide effective training. So as we're going through that, just keep in mind that the offline simulation tool will make that the subject matter expert, the asset in the virtual sense, and the simulation of these non-standard critical activities. It makes those available to be performed or used anytime, 24/7. Now, Christian's going to show you our enhanced reality platform, while you hopefully can think of ways that our solution would add value to your team. Christian, over.
Yeah, thank you, Clint. So I'm going to do a quick sort of 7-8 minute overview, but some of you may have seen this before, but I want you to think of of emergency procedures specifically here. So in the case of a sudden loss of utility or other emergency which you have not obviously which is abrupt and you haven't planned for, how can you proactively build that knowledge and the ability to react quickly and safely as possible? So in order to achieve this and familiarize people and be able to simulate, you've got to have let's say a visual. You've got to have what we call a digital replica. So what you're hopefully seeing on the screen is exactly that. It is a real view of the plant, which I'm accessing on my computer here. So you can walk around, you can turn around. This is built using photographs. So hopefully it's smooth on your end, but it's definitely smooth on my computer here. You can access this on a laptop, any kind of computer in the control room. So operators have that accessibility 24/7. The important thing is you have the realism. So operators see their real equipment here on the screen. And the fact that it's built with photographs makes it easy to update. It is a simulatable environment, so this is key to be able to review and practice emergency procedures. So you can see here I can actually interact with this lever valve. But operators have that ability to review and familiarize themselves not only with the emergency procedures, but being able to find things is really valuable. So all of that tagged equipment we have here in a searchable index. So you can actually type in, like I am right now for the recirc line. Let's go to this one, 773. You can type it in and it will take you straight to where that item is located. And you can see that on the map as well at the bottom. So really valuable when that SME, that subject matter expert, is not available, in that moment, and you need to find something. Likewise with enhanced views, these are really powerful as well, not only from a learning perspective or onboarding, but a refresher point of view where you can review things again. If that subject matter expert is not available, here the enhanced views bring that piece of equipment to life, according to the different lines. You can even practice valve lineups in this example here. So that ability to have the digital replica available 24/7 is really powerful. So here you have a complex manifold, and you'll see my mouse is on one of the valves with that label appearing in the bottom right. And if you interact with this, you can open the valve and the flow will correspond to the state of that valve. So there you can actually practice valve lineups and things like that, which customers do regularly. So we've talked about the digital replica, but what about the emergency procedures themselves? So having the ability to be able to review and practice the procedure as it is supposed to be performed is powerful. And I keep saying this is available 24/7. Operators can do this in their own time or on shift or whenever, in a controlled environment, or on their laptop or in the control room when they have time. Let me just walk through the simulator itself, because this is important and shows how you can drive that procedure clarity for those emergency scenarios. You have the digital replica on the right, which where you can interact. You have that map, so you can always see where you are in the facility. You have the emergency procedure here on the left, and above that there's an additional checklist. Now this is that first step of procedure clarity, because often what we find is procedures have general statements in them. And what I mean by that, we always use the example of one step may say, close all the drain valves, and that's it. But what if there's 12 drain valves? So in this action checklist, you would have 12 line items here. So the operator is very clear about where they are, and maybe even the sequence to perform that step in. So here I'm going to close that first drain valve. So this is me physically having to interact with the equipment, and it takes me to the next step once I've completed that. So it's like a virtual subject matter expert. And your experts, your subject matter experts, can put their tribal knowledge, their expertise in these knowledge snippets. So if there's anything related to this emergency scenario, maybe it's something that happened previously, you can put it in these knowledge snippets. Videos are very popular for things, the way you need to operate something, or the sound or vibration you need to hear, or it could be a caution, a warning, something like that, things to watch out for. So those knowledge snippets are really powerful, and again, very, very useful to capture that knowledge and make sure it's not lost in the next emergency. So being able to walk through the emergency procedure step by step with that visual and action checklist really provides that clarity. You can have operators review this monthly, quarterly, annually, however your organization feels the frequency at which they need to review and learn this. Now, what about going a step further and being able to test and document whether each shift or each production area knows that procedure as well as they should? There is a test capability here. So we've got customers that utilize this for qualification, requalification, and also some that assign tests on specific procedures and emergency procedures on a monthly basis. So it really depends on your organization, but the tools are here to be able to achieve that. So what you're looking at now is me walking through this procedure. I'm going to actually perform the first step correctly. And the system is logging everything I'm doing. So remember that, because that's important. You'll see here on the left, it says action completed correctly. And I'm going to show you in a second some data analytics, which is useful as well for ensuring that preparedness. But you'll see here when I make an error, so let's go to that lever valve that I was at before. I'm going to open that valve and confirm, and you'll see it's actually tracking here everything I'm doing, which was the wrong valve, SW872. If I had walked up to a control panel and hit the wrong button, it would have logged that. But you have all of that detail here. Now, because this is a simulator, you can try again. So when you make an error, you can try again. So I'm going to reset myself using the map here at the bottom. And I'm going to perform this action correctly now. And it was this blue valve, which is always left open. So now you can see in the report here on the left in the green box, I got it right after 2 attempts. So all of that data is actually being stored in the form of a report in the cloud. It's automatic. You don't need to worry about it. All progress is automatically saved if you come in and out of a session. But importantly, you can assign groups of people an emergency procedure to either practice on or maybe have an official test on, or even a practice test. And you as a training manager or an operations manager can track who has completed it and who has not. In this example here where you're looking, you can see those who have not completed this assignment and those who have, with the number of attempts, the scores, the date, and all that. And you can access those reports as well. So here is my report. And here you can see I did pass, but I did make one error. The fact that you're collecting all these metrics, this data from that test is very powerful, because for this group of people, it could be a shift, or it could be the whole group of operators. You can see for specific emergency procedures where your organization's level of knowledge is at. Now, in this graph, you will see on the bottom axis, we have the score, the test score. And on the left axis, the y-axis, we've got the number of tests taken. So you'll see here that 13 people got 100% out of this group, with the average well over 90%, which is fantastic. However, there is a red flag here. There's 3 individuals that got below the passing score, and you can set that passing score, whether it's 80%, 70%, whatever it is. But in this case, there were 3 individuals who got below that passing score. So immediately there, you have a view of where your organization is at and where you may need to focus your attention. And the fact that the simulator is recording or tracking rather every question, every step, you can see where people are, maybe going wrong more frequently on specific steps. So for example, in this graph, you have the step number at the bottom, and you'll see that step number 4 here was answered incorrectly 3 times. So you could look at the test reports and go through those. That is your documented information there, but you can also just click on that step number here, which is what I'm going to do now. And it will open that up in the simulator. So you can take a look at the emergency procedure mapped to the real equipment. And you'll see here, so why were they getting this wrong? Actually, they were opening the wrong valve. There are 2 identical valves here. They were opening up the wrong one. So maybe this gives an opportunity to improve the wording in the procedure. Maybe you can improve the action checklist wording here, or you could make a physical change in the field, whether it's tags or something else. Or simply in the next training session or review of that emergency procedure, you can focus on this area. So it gives you that, let's say that those extra metrics related to your emergency procedures and let's say the competency level in those procedures to make much more informed decisions and plans on how to proactively plan for the next event. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to, I'm going to pass it over to Fran. And I believe, Fran, you have control. So hopefully, let me go back to the screen share here. Hopefully you can take it away.
Okay, thank you, Christian, and thank you, Clint. So let's talk about everything you've heard as a refresher. So emergency procedures, those events will happen. You will have to use those procedures. The challenge in the industry is how do you prepare the organization for those procedures, those infrequent, abrupt events that will occur. So as I've been around to a lot of different companies, different sites, what I have found is the top three practices in the industry are procedure reviews, whether they're reviewing them quarterly, monthly, annually. It's just passing that procedure around and letting the operators review them. Tabletop drills, it's another favorite of several companies, and just process walkthroughs, walking the operator through the unit, helping them understand what to do in case there's that extreme weather, high winds, a lightning strike, or even a power blip, as some of the examples that Clint gave. But even though they're doing these types of reviews and walkthroughs, those events, the errors are still occurring during those events. And as Clint mentioned, extreme cost to the industry as well as production losses. So those events are going to happen. How do you prepare for those emergency procedures that just don't happen? One thing that, let me go to the next chart here, is talking about that relationship between the human and the assets. We have a lot of data in the industry around how the asset is performing, but how do we prepare the human to interact with that asset during those emergency events, those procedures that aren't executed frequently? And the challenge is to make our workforce competent so they can execute these procedures efficiently, effectively, and reliably every time, and not require that one person that knows how to shut down the boiler or how to idle the process. It's really making that entire organization competent. So how do we do that? Christian touched on clarity, and I'm going to spend a little more time on procedure clarity because it's really important. And what I'm seeing in the industry as I go across multiple sites, multiple companies, is the clarity is just not there for the operator. And what do I mean by that? Well, the procedures sometimes don't match the practice and vice versa. So the most important point is aligning the practice with procedure. And then once that occurs, Christian gave the example of opening, the drain valves, a very common finding we see in procedures. Another one is line up the pump, line up the equipment. Well, that's not clear and concise. So it's important to create that checklist so the operators know exactly what to do. And then tying that into a visual, a realistic visual for this operator to then connect that clear, concise step with the action in the component in the field, so then they can start visualizing how that will occur and how that will happen. And then lastly, and most importantly, is giving them the ability to practice executing that emergency procedure, that infrequent procedure, using a simulator. And that leads into what is very common in the industry. A lot of people have shared and are very well aware of the learning pyramid, adult learning, and if we give the operator a procedure to read, they're only going to retain about 10%. And if they're reviewing that once a quarter, once a year, because it is an infrequent event, it's those emergency procedures, they're not going to know what to do when that event happens. So if you look down at the bottom, if they're able to practice using a simulator what to do in the field when the event occurs, whatever that event may be, it's those emergency infrequent procedures. There is a lot of data in industry that shows they will retain that information and be able to demonstrate when acted upon. And we've collected the data from our customers and shown this chart. And if anyone's joined our conferences in the past, very common chart that we go through, but I'm going to go through it again, and then I'll go through some customer examples. On the y-axis is competency. On the x-axis is time. Given the operator the ability to practice simulators 24/7, independent of the SME or the trainer's availability or the first line manager's availability, really enables that operator to build that competency a lot faster and more efficiently. Traditionally, there's job shadowing and procedure walkthroughs and some type of qualification. We have, again, lots of data from a variety of customers that show simulators build competency a lot faster and more efficiently. And as we talked about developing that standardized execution of responding to those infrequent events, it's about error-free execution. And again, we're seeing that with our customers. So with that, let me jump in and share some of our examples that have been fed back to us by our customer. So I talked about the variety of different practices in the industry. The first one I want to share with you is a major oil refinery that had implemented Vuvio. And what they did upon implementation is they wanted to compare using Vuvio versus their standard practice of tabletop drills. And in this case, it was feed diversion and taking the process to a hot standby. So they simply split up the organization into those that would train on Vuvio and those that would continue to do the tabletop exercises. The subject matter expert happened to be the ops manager for that unit, took the individual operators out to the unit and asked them to demonstrate what they would do in case of the feed diversion. And then they reported back results. And the results were telling. 70% of those that practice Vuvio, they demonstrate 70% more accurate execution when asked to go and demonstrate in the field. The next one is around startup and equipment swap procedures. This was in a petrochemical facility, a major company. And what they had their operators do was practice the simulators, Vuvio simulators, versus the traditional way of training and educating the operators on these types of procedures. And again, when comparing those that practice the Vuvio simulators with those that practice the standard learning method of reviewing procedures with the subject matter expert, with the training leads, walking the procedures in the field, those that use the Vuvio simulators were able to demonstrate procedure competency 65% faster. A couple more. Here in earlier this year, we had a significant freeze that affected the entire country, significantly down on the Gulf Coast. So we had implemented our project at one of the sites at a major petrochemical company, and one of their sites was afforded the ability to have Vuvio in place. And they shared with us that they were able to restart their unit days ahead of a sister site with very similar equipment, because their operators were very competent on how to execute that startup, that infrequent startup that was one of their emergency procedures, because the operators had practiced. And what the training coordinator did prior to the restart was had all the operators refresh on the simulators and then go execute. And they brought the unit right up, versus the other unit that didn't have the simulators in place. They struggled, and it took several days later before they were able to restart. And then the last example is in one of our customers, again, a major petrochemical facility where they have a cogen unit. And this customer, they shared with us, they suffered from significant delays in restarting their cogen units because they didn't do it very often. So we simulated the startup procedure. They had their operators practice and demonstrate competency in the cogen startup procedure. And then when called upon, they were able to restart that unit without fail, without any delays and no diversion. So again, hopefully this gives you a sense of the value that simulators will provide your operators so that they are competent and confident for those emergency procedures, those procedures that are just infrequent and they don't have the opportunity to practice because you're not always shutting a unit down with a power failure or with a emergency, any type of emergency event. The procedure simulators are definitely proving to be valuable for our customers. So with that, Kristen, I'll turn it back to you if you have any questions. And you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. So we've got some questions coming in. So thank you, and keep them coming in. So let me just pull some of them up here. Apologies for during the demo, I heard some feedback from some participants that it was a little bit jumpy, the demonstration. So apologies for that. That's likely the Zoom conference issue, but if we do this in person, it's totally smooth. So I've got one, a bunch of questions here actually. So let's look at the first one, which is, okay, so I liked your presentation, but do you have examples of real usefulness of your solutions? I experienced the freeze in my site and everything was a total mess. We had critical people confined because of COVID. How could you have helped me there? So Clint or Fran, which?
Yeah, I can build on that. So, I shared some of those examples with our customer feedback, and the one was around the freeze. So I guess a couple things. The simulators definitely prepare the operators for the execution because they're practicing those emergency procedures, the ones they don't get to see very often. So the practice, the repetition, the clear and concise action steps, that's one thing that really helps them understand how to execute during that emergency. But the other thing I add, because I think the question mentioned something about COVID and maybe not, I'll stretch that, maybe they didn't have the right resources on site. During the pandemic, we've had many of our customers using Vuvio and the realism of the digital replica as a means to continue their daily rack-ups with the non-essential personnel that were asked to stay home. So having that digital replica and being able to connect with the operator from off-site and walking through the process and understanding exactly where the issues may be brings a level of clarity to help that operator troubleshoot and address any issues that may pop up and prepare them for that emergency startup or shutdown to a hot idle. So I think there's several tools that Vuvio can assist with addressing these unplanned emergency events.
Okay, thank you, Fran. So question number 2 here. We've tried to push for initiatives like this in the past, but have had trouble getting enough support to move forward. So if you can share, what are your customers using for justification to invest? So Clint or Fran?
Clint, if you want that one, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry about that. Let me jump on that one. I mean, we got customers doing the full gamut, right? Justifying things in pieces. Some of them are fortunate enough to be able to carve out money and just assign it to Vuvio. But I think you mentioned something about initiative. That's one of those keywords that always jumps out to me. And honestly, as odd as it may sound, I think, treating Vuvio as an initiative and taking the initiative approach wrong one. Plants have a ton of initiative. They're always full of activities. I view Vuvio and our solution a little different. I think Vuvio is a tool. Every plant I've worked for, worked in, around, it has initiatives and work streams already in place for things like OEE, reliability improvement, asset effectiveness, operational excellence, cost savings, all things like that already. The benefit is and of Vuvio is and should always be contributing value to those initiatives that already exist. Again, I see Vuvio is more of a tool that's applied within those work streams, taking advantage of any and every place where I'd say human action can improve one of the already measured KPIs within an existing work stream. Because many times, human factors or human action, it might not be the cause of an issue, but the actions may be, operations PMs or better understanding how to properly do pump swaps or other equipment swaps. Those can improve unit reliability. And I would embed it there and apply it that way. If it's labeled as its own initiative separately and standalone, it's going to automatically require, more resources. It's going to compete for budget and priority against other initiatives when it shouldn't work against them. These things should be complementary. And a lot of times digitalization is top of mind. We can take it as an example. There are organizations, most large ones have full, digitalization initiatives, entire organizations devoted. But they're begging for funding and competing against these other initiatives and other valuable initiatives for funding. And hardly any of them are where they want to be when you look at digitalization. So to get where we need to be, I think we roll it into, the reliability, unit uptime, things like that. Don't throw it over in training or do we put it at the back of the line for funding. To get in there and fight, we should be competing against other reliability initiatives that contribute to the bottom line. If we overthink it more than we should, it's going to continue to be an uphill challenge. So long answer, but I think that's why I think it's more similar to an OpEx tool than its own separate standalone initiative.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so we've got quite a few questions. We'll get through all of them. Two of our supervisors that champion our emergency response team will retire in the next couple of years. How could you capture their expertise in your system? How much does it cost? Have you done it before? And can you give me a ballpark figure? So Clint or Fran?
I'll take that. So that was a lot. Let me try to remember. So they have some senior folks retiring.
Yep.
And capturing that knowledge. So,
right.
So I guess a couple of things come to mind. One, the first thing we do when we get on site is we'll do a walkthrough of that procedure with the subject matter expert. In this case, it may be some of these senior leaders that are retiring. And we're going to capture their knowledge of that procedure and create those action steps. And when we create those action steps and marry it to the digital replica, that's one way of capturing a lot of their knowledge. But then the other piece we do a lot of is the knowledge snippets. And that's where it could be a video, a picture, text, whatever it may be, to again capture some of those nuances of of the procedure. So that's first and foremost. Do that walkthrough, capture their knowledge, document it in the action checklist, and then grab those nuances and put them in knowledge snippets. What was the next piece, Christian? So we got their knowledge.
Cost. How much does it cost? Have you done it before? Can you give me a ballpark figure?
So yes, we've done it. We've done it often with lots of customers. Ballpark figure, that's challenging, but from a round number standpoint, the reason it's challenging because procedures differ all across the industry. It could be a significant complex process startup, or it can be rail car loading or tank truck loading or unloading that are smaller in size. So ballpark figure, sure. If we were to do a set of, let's say, loading and unloading, rail car, tank truck procedures, and to cover the unit or the site's loading and unloading, that can be anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000 project. If we start looking into the process startup shutdowns, the bigger procedures, those can range 100,000, 150,000. It really just depends on the size of the procedure, the number of the components, and then really the layout of the facility. So if we look at all those components to really come up with an estimate, it's simple to get an estimate. You send us procedures, you send us 20, 30, 40 procedures, we'll review them and get right back to you on cost for implementation, timing to implement, et cetera. Timing to implement, we haven't talked about that, but timing to implement, I'll touch on that. Our standard project, we're implementing in 13 to 14 weeks from the time of the photo shoot to the time we deliver everything that Christian showed you. It's a quick turn, and everything you saw is what we'll deliver in those 13 to 14 weeks.
Yeah, just to add to that, actually, Fran, those figures, that Fran just gave are multiple procedures, not just one. So, and it's important to keep in mind that with the economies of scale, the more procedures you do in a production unit, the cost per procedure comes down dramatically. So keep that in mind, and that's why it's good to think more big picture as well to drive down the cost per procedure. But it makes very economical sense and easy to implement as well. We've got a question specifically on, I guess, the demo here. Our response to emergency or abrupt process upsets require operators to respond in the field and on the board, on our DCS. Can Vuvio simulate DCS operation too? The answer is yes. I could quickly just show what that looks like. If I just go here, so 1 second, asking you for some patience. And I'll pull up a procedure here. So hopefully you can see my screen, right, Fran?
Yes.
So basically the replica, as you saw before, becomes the DCS screen. So here you can see I'm actually interacting with the screen, and the faceplates pop up and they change, and you can toggle and input different values and so forth. So yes, the answer is yes, we can simulate those types of steps. Okay, next question. These emergency, let me go back to the slide deck. So these emergency events are infrequent. How do your customers keep their operators competent in these emergency procedures? So how do you keep operators competent in these emergency procedures if they're infrequent?
Yeah, I'll take that one, Christian. I think Fran alluded to it probably in some of the examples before, where the simulator in and of itself delivers a better initial, early on time to competency and retain learning. and as far as repetitive training, different customers are doing it differently. Some are doing, for, standard shutdown and start up before hurricane season. Obviously, that's an easy one. Some are doing, if it's a little more sensitive operation, maybe quarterly. So I think it's about proactively training them, depending on operational complexity, and probably something you'll learn over time about what's the quality of that retained learning, and how are they holding on to that. I think as far as using, maintaining connection with the program or the tool or the platform, I think it's always important not to just only simulate those critical events that are extremely rare, right? Because again, they're rare, and the value extraction might not be exactly what we want. So simulating additional procedures or activities where the operators can continue to use the tool, be comfortable with the tool, and then also retraining, seasonally, but anywhere between quarterly and annually, depending on the complexity, to keep that retained learning necessary to respond to the events.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, Clint. You're spot on. If I think of some of the customers and how they're using it based on the examples that I gave, the 4 examples, they basically set their modules up and they have their operators complete 1 or 2 modules monthly, so that over an 18-month period, they cover all the modules. So it's really about, as Clint mentioned, determining that frequency, determining which procedures are most critical, and then putting them on a cycle so it's a routine review, and the practice makes them comfortable and competent in executing those procedures.
Yeah, I guess just to add, I mean, just using the platform. It's available. It's very easy. So just using it is the only way. But next question. So we've got one I think I know the answer to, but do you have experience in lube oil blending plants using Vuvio simulation? Do you have experience in lube oil blending plants using Vuvio simulation? Fran, I guess can you answer this?
Yes, I can. So we actually have a customer that is in the process of implementing a project. That's exactly what they do. So so the answer is yes. We're gaining that experience, and again, it's really about our application. Our solution can be tailored to fit, whether it's lube oil app or any kind of process industry. So yes, we are gaining that experience and can definitely and will definitely help those operators on becoming comfortable on how to execute any of the blends from whatever systems they're using.
Okay, so from the same person asking the question, what is the commercial concept how Vuvio simulation is marketed? Is it a license per plant? Does it depend on plant size, or depending on the number of users or the number of items simulated? And I mean, I can take a quick bash at this one. So the price, there's 2 components. One is creating the content, those simulators and the replica that I showed you. That is priced on a per procedure basis or per site basis. And you send us the procedures, we review them, we give them a price per procedure. Very easy. There is a licensing component, and each production area that has its own replica and its own group of operators and its own procedures would buy a license. And it's not limited by the number of users. It's unlimited users. Doesn't matter how big that area is. It could be really small, it could be huge. The impact on the number of items simulated or the content you have, there's a very, very small increase as you grow the content, but we're talking tens of dollars on a monthly basis extra. I mean, it's nothing. So if you want to get more specific pricing, we can of course talk to us offline, and we can do that absolutely, and and even give you specific pricing for your plant. Next question. Our plant is always changing physically. How are the pictures kept up to date? Anyone want to take that?
Now I'll start. So pictures kept up to date. So to me, this is one of the best attributes of Vuvio. Updating is very simple. They're JPEGs, they're digital pictures. So if something changes, if there's a change, like Christian used the example on that one valve that was very similar to the other. Let's say the organization decided to paint the one valve red. Go out in the field, take a picture of that new red valve with your cell phone, your digital camera that you have at the site. You send it to us, we'll drop it in, pull the old picture out. It's updated. It's very simple. It's quick. If there's a more significant change, let's say you added a bypass, a new piece of equipment, we would recommend that you have our engineers out to spend a few hours on site, take those pictures, and we'll drop it into the digital replica. Again, that is our secret sauce. I mean, it's the patent where we can take simple digital pictures and put them together so you can walk seamlessly through them. They are not stitched together. It does not require any kind of a laser scan. It's simple. The updating is very simple. So yeah, Christian or Clint, anything to add?
Yeah, not a lot. I mean, I think you nailed it with the secret sauce, right? That's the major part of the value proposition versus some other people who try to do some similar things that we do. You know, the cost to maintain and update is very small compared to thousands and tens of thousands to come reshoot for a small change. The ability and the time required. You know, coming from the plants, the time to implement a change and work that into the MOC process is critical, right? So if you got emergency MOC, you need to get started up. You've got some new people coming. You have to get that. If it's considered part of your training, you've got to get that change. So when you look at sustainability and viability for a realistic, normal running plant that experiences changes, the speed to change and our ability to do that is kind of what sets us apart.
So Christian, we're running up on the hour. Two things I'd like to add. Clint mentioned time, and I know that's a significant challenge for a lot of our plant sites because they're resource limited. Vuvio, we can implement your project with minimal resources. We do not take much of your resource time at all. We're on site for those 3, 4, maybe 5 days, and then we go away. We'll check in a couple times, but minimal resource requirements and minimal time requirements from your resources. And again, simple to update. After we're there for those 3, 4, 5 days, we go away and then we're ready to deliver the content in 13, 14 weeks. We'll show up on site and make sure your operators are trained, competent, and comfortable in using Vuvio. So just wanted to add that because I know time's a challenge for a lot of our manufacturing units.
We've got, just 2 more questions quickly. Do sites currently or can this software be used to simulate emergency response without a procedure as a base, i.e. leak of hazardous chemical, and then looking for escape respirators, routes of escape, and etc. Fran or Clint, I mean, the answer is, I guess, yes, we can. I mean, essentially it is a procedure, even though there is not a procedure as a base, right?
Yeah. So again, I'll start, but you know, we have some customers that say, I need to clean up my procedures before I want to have you in. So that would be the absolute wrong thing to do, because when we show up on site with our engineers, we're going to walk that procedure with your subject matter expert, your emergency response leader, the person that understands how to execute that emergency procedure, even though it may not be documented. We will walk that with you, and we'll create the action step, even if you don't have a procedure. So yes, we can do that. We'll create that content for you. We'll take the pictures that are needed, and we'll marry those two together so it's clear and concise for those operators and they know how to respond.
Yeah, and thinking how that would work, Fran, with this question about how we do that, I think, yeah, we would set those escape respirators up as components, and we'd kind of have to do a scenario based depending on where the employee was. I don't know of anybody doing so. I think the question was, is anybody doing it? I don't know that I've seen it, though I've only been with Fuvio about 3 months. But I don't see an issue with doing something like that fairly quickly, honestly.
Yeah. So one last question, and I guess we'll wrap it up. We're just over the hour. This has been touched on before. I am familiar with other simulation solutions. What is it about Vuvio that's different? And I think Fran said it just before. It's basically it's a combination of things. 3 main things. It's the realism that operators see their real plant on the screen, and that is crucial in building that familiarity and competency. The second thing that Fran just touched upon is updating. The ease of keeping this solution up to date and evergreen is key. And the life cycle cost of the solution is really much drastically lower than alternatives on the market. And the user friendliness as well. It's very easy to use. So I think with that, unless Fran and Clint have any other comments to jump in, we can wrap this up. So thank you everyone for joining. It was a great turnout, and I'm sure you're all looking forward to the holidays. So if you do have any specific questions, I know some of you were touching on pricing and specific examples, please get in touch. You've got our emails on the screen. Follow us on LinkedIn as well. We do publish updates to upcoming webinars and events that we're at, because we do attend and partake, present and sponsor events throughout North America very regularly, and 2022 is going to be a busy year for us. So please follow us on LinkedIn. And thank you very much. I hope it was enjoyable and useful, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.